You are watching your flock do what chickens do on an ordinary afternoon, scratching, foraging, moving across the yard in that loose, purposeful way that suggests they always know exactly where they are going, even when they clearly do not. And then one of them stops, drops her head, pecks at the ground in a way that looks different from the usual food-finding peck, more deliberate, more considered. And she picks up a small stone. Not a seed, not a bug, not anything that looks remotely like food, a small hard piece of gravel, and she swallows it, on purpose, apparently with satisfaction. If you are new to chickens, this stops you mid-step. You run through a quick mental inventory of what could be wrong with her. Is she sick? Is she missing something? Is this the chicken equivalent of a toddler eating dirt, a sign of some deficiency or developmental oddity you should be worried about? You watch the rest of the flock and realize they are all doing it, at various intervals, with the same calm intentionality, and nobody seems distressed, and the internet tells you it is normal, so you file it away as one of the many strange things chickens do and move on. But the actual explanation for why a chicken eats small stones is one of the more elegant pieces of biological engineering in the backyard, and once you understand the full picture of what those stones are doing inside your hen, you will look at a gravel pile in the yard completely differently. You will understand something about how a chicken is built that changes the way you think about feeding them, managing them, and reading their behavior when something is off. And one part of it, the part about what happens inside the bird after the stone is swallowed, is something most people who have kept chickens for years still do not fully know. Welcome back. Subscribe before you leave, because this one goes from a simple observation to a piece of functional anatomy that is genuinely worth understanding. To understand why the stones matter, you have to start with a constraint that shapes everything about how a chicken processes food. A constraint that is so fundamental to the bird's design that the stones are not a supplement to the digestive system, they are a required component of it. Birds do not have teeth. This is obvious when you look at them, but the implications of it are less obvious and more significant than they first appear. Teeth are not just for biting. In most animals with them, teeth are the first stage of mechanical digestion, the breaking down of food into smaller pieces that increases the surface area available to digestive enzymes and allows the chemistry of digestion to work faster and more completely. A mammal chewing a seed is not just making it small enough to swallow, it is dramatically increasing the efficiency of everything that happens after the swallow. A chicken has no teeth, she cannot chew, she swallows food whole or in pieces she has broken with her beak, which can crack some things but cannot grind. If you watch a chicken eating grain, she is not chewing it in any meaningful sense, she is picking it up and swallowing it. The seed goes down intact, or nearly so. And an intact seed is a problem for digestion because the outer coat of a seed is specifically designed by the plant to resist being broken down. Seeds want to pass through digestive systems intact, to be deposited elsewhere and germinate. The plant and the bird are in a mild evolutionary contest over this, and without a grinding mechanism, the bird loses that contest on a significant fraction of every meal. The grinding mechanism is the gizzard, and the gizzard needs grit to work. The gizzard is a muscular organ, dense and powerful, that sits between the proventriculus, the true stomach where enzymes begin breaking food down chemically, and the small intestine where nutrients are absorbed. Its walls are thick, heavily muscled, and lined with a tough, ridged surface called the koilin layer, a keratin-based lining that is hard enough to resist the abrasion of continuous grinding without wearing away quickly. The gizzard contracts rhythmically and powerfully. In a laying hen actively processing feed, the gizzard contracts several times per minute, squeezing its contents against that ridged lining with considerable force. The grinding action is mechanical, physical compression and abrasion that breaks seeds, husks, fibrous plant material, and other hard food items into particles small enough for the digestive chemistry downstream to work on efficiently. A gizzard working without grit is like a mill working without millstones. The mechanical structure is there, the muscle is there, the contractions are happening, but there is nothing hard enough inside the organ to do the actual grinding. Soft food passes through with reasonable efficiency even without grit, which is why a chicken on a diet of soft, easily digestible food can survive without it. But hard seeds, whole grains, fibrous vegetation, the tough outer coats of many insects, these require something inside the gizzard that is harder than the food itself. The grit is the millstone. When a chicken picks up a small stone and swallows it deliberately, she is stocking her mill. Here is a detail that most people find surprising once they think about it. Chickens are not indiscriminate about which stones they swallow. They are selecting for size, hardness, and to some degree shape, with a specificity that reflects a real functional requirement. The stones that work best as gizzard grit are small enough to be held inside the gizzard without obstructing it, hard enough to resist being broken down themselves during the grinding process, and irregular enough in surface texture to provide effective abrasion against food particles. A stone that is too large will not enter the gizzard properly. A stone that is too soft will be ground down to nothing quickly and will need to be replaced faster than a harder stone. A stone that is perfectly smooth may not provide as effective a grinding surface as one with edges and texture. Watch a chicken selecting grit from a gravel area and you will see that she does not peck randomly at every piece. She evaluates. She picks something up, sometimes drops it and moves on, sometimes swallows it. The selection process is brief, but it is real. She is making assessments based on sensory information from her beak, which is more sensitive than it looks, and from visual evaluation of what she is looking at. This is also why the grit you provide matters if you are providing it, rather than relying on free-ranging access. The commercially available chicken grit comes in sizes labeled for different ages and sizes of birds, and the sizing is not arbitrary. Chick grit is finer than layer grit because a chick's gizzard is smaller and the stones need to fit the organ they are going into. Getting this wrong, offering large grit to small birds, can cause crop or gizzard impaction, a serious problem. The size calibration exists for a real reason. This is the piece that causes the most confusion in backyard chicken keeping, and it is worth being precise about because the confusion leads to real management mistakes. There are two completely different things that get called grit in the context of chickens, and they serve completely different functions in completely different parts of the digestive system. Understanding the difference changes how you think about what your flock needs. The first is insoluble grit, which is what we have been discussing. Granite, quartz, and other hard mineral stones that do not dissolve in the acidic environment of the digestive system. These go into the gizzard, stay there for an extended period doing their grinding work, and are eventually passed out of the system when they have worn down enough to be too small to be useful. The chicken replaces them by eating more. This is what free-ranging chickens are picking up when you see them selecting small stones from the yard. The second is soluble grit, which is typically crushed oyster shell or crushed limestone. This dissolves in the digestive system and is a calcium source. It goes through the gizzard the same way other digestible material does and is absorbed as a mineral nutrient. If you have been following this series, you will recognize this from our earlier discussion of egg eating and calcium deficiency. Oyster shell is not a grinding medium. It dissolves too quickly to function as grit in the gizzard sense. It is a calcium supplement. These two things are often sold side by side in the same feed store, sometimes in similar packaging, and the word grit gets applied loosely to both. A chicken who has plenty of oyster shell but no insoluble grit has her calcium needs addressed but her grinding needs unmet. A chicken who has plenty of insoluble grit but no oyster shell has her grinding needs addressed but her calcium needs unmet. They are not interchangeable. They solve different problems. Both are necessary. Neither replaces the other. Here is the part of the story that most people who have kept chickens for years have not thought through, and it is worth understanding because it explains the ongoing behavior of stone eating rather than treating it as something that happens once and is done. The stones in a chicken's gizzard wear down. Every grinding cycle, every contraction of those powerful muscles pressing food against the grit removes a small amount of material from both the food and the stone. The food is reduced to particles small enough to digest. The stone is reduced in size and eventually in roughness. A stone that started out as a useful grinding surface with irregular edges and adequate size becomes, over weeks of continuous use, a smooth, small pebble that no longer provides effective abrasion. At that point, it passes out of the gizzard and eventually out of the bird, and the gizzard needs to be restocked. This is why stone eating is not a one-time behavior but a continuous one. A free-ranging chicken is topping up her grit supply on an ongoing basis, replacing stones that have worn out with fresh ones. The frequency with which she does this depends on how hard her diet is, because a harder diet, more whole grains, more fibrous vegetation, more tough insects, wears through grit faster than a soft diet. A chicken eating primarily soft, easily digestible food needs to restock her gizzard less often than a chicken eating a diet heavy in whole seeds and fibrous material. This is also why chickens confined to a run without access to natural ground will show apparent grit-seeking behavior, pecking at walls, at concrete, at anything that might serve if their insoluble grit supply runs out. The behavior looks odd in that context, but it is the same mechanism expressing itself in an environment where the normal supply is not available. The practical implications of all of this are fairly straightforward once the mechanism is clear, but they are specific enough to be worth stating directly. A flock that has consistent free-range access to natural ground with varied soil and gravel will typically manage their own grit intake without any intervention from you. They are selecting stones as they forage, continuously restocking their gizzards with appropriate-sized grit as the old supply wears out. The system is self-managing in a natural setting, a flock in a confined run, on a deep bedding system without access to natural soil, or fed primarily commercial pelleted or crumbled feed with no whole grains, may still meet their grit needs from incidental material in the environment, but the supply is less reliable and the consequences of running short are real. Reduced feed efficiency is the main one. A chicken without adequate grit is not digesting her food as completely, which means she is extracting less nutrition per gram of feed consumed. In practical terms, this can show up as reduced laying, slower growth, duller feathers, and general underperformance that looks like a feed quality problem or a health issue when the actual cause is a grinding problem. Offering insoluble grit-free choice in a separate container, the same way you offer oyster shell, solves this cleanly. Granite grit or commercial poultry grit in the appropriate size for your birds, always available, and your flock will take what they need. The cost is minimal. The insurance value is real. There is something worth stepping back to appreciate here, and it is the elegance of the solution a bird's body arrived at to a genuine mechanical problem. The absence of teeth is not just an absence, it is a design choice that comes with a different architecture. A bird does not carry the weight of heavy jaw muscles and dense tooth-bearing skull structures. Her skull is light and her beak is versatile in ways that teeth would prevent. The trade-off is that the grinding function had to move elsewhere, deeper into the body where the weight is better distributed for flight, and the solution to having a grinding organ deeper in the body is to eat the millstones separately, on an ongoing basis, from the ground below you. It is an arrangement that requires the bird to be continuously aware of her internal state, continuously reading the environment for the right material, and continuously managing the supply of a component that most of her digestive system cannot produce for itself. She is maintaining her own equipment from the outside in real time, and she does it without thinking about it, or at least without anything that looks like deliberate cognition. She is foraging and she encounters a piece of gravel of the right size and hardness, and something in her assessment of that piece says yes, and she swallows it. The ongoing management of her gizzard's grinding capacity is woven seamlessly into the normal activity of moving through the world and picking up things from the ground. That is the system working exactly as it was designed to work, in a design that is considerably older than anything humans have built. The next time you are watching your flock and one of them stops, drops her head with that particular focused attention, and swallows a piece of gravel, you are watching something that is easy to overlook precisely because it looks so casual. She picked up a stone, she swallowed it, she moved on. What actually happened is that she assessed a piece of mineral material for size, hardness, and texture using sensory information from a beak that is more discriminating than it appears, determined that it met the specifications for a useful grinding medium inside an organ designed specifically to run on stones, and added it to the supply she is continuously managing to keep her digestive system operating at full efficiency. She did all of that in approximately 1 second, on her way to somewhere else, as part of an ordinary afternoon. There is something in that worth noticing. The backyard you are watching is full of these small, functional moments that look like nothing and are actually everything. The stone she swallowed will still be doing useful work inside her 3 weeks from now, ground down a little more each day, replaced eventually by another stone she has not found yet. It is a quiet system. It runs continuously. It requires almost nothing from you beyond making sure the supply is available. And now you know what it is for. Tell me in the comments, did you know about gizzard grit before this, or was this one new to you? I want to hear. See you in the next one.